Marriage is a bit like steel. Bend it too much and it snaps. I learned that lesson the hard way, but not before I turned the tables on the woman who thought she could play me for a fool. My name is Greg Griffin, and I'm what you might call an underestimated man. At 38, I manage operations at Riverside Steel in Pennsylvania, a job that requires more brains than most people think. Sure, I wear work boots and carry a hard hat, but I've got an engineering degree and 15 years of experience reading people like blueprints. That skill came in handy when my wife Alicia decided to turn our marriage into her personal playground. Alicia is, or was, everything I thought I wanted. 5'6", auburn hair that catches light like copper wire, and the kind of confidence that fills a room. She works as HR director at Morrison Industries, making decent money and commanding respect from her colleagues. For 12 years, I thought we had something solid. Turns out, I was building on quicksand. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning in October. I was making coffee when I noticed lipstick on one of our mugs, deep red, not the subtle pink Alicia usually wore. When I mentioned it, she laughed it off. "Must be from that new shade I tried yesterday," she said, not needing my eyes. You know how I am with makeup experiments. Except I'd seen her makeup collection, organized like a military operation, every tube and compact in its designated spot. Alicia doesn't experiment, she perfects. The hotel keycard fell out of her purse 3 weeks later, Embassy Suites, dated for the previous weekend when she'd supposedly been visiting her sister in Pittsburgh. I held that plastic rectangle like it was evidence in a courtroom, which, in a way, it was.
"Honey," I called from the kitchen, keeping my voice level. "Did you stay at a hotel when you visited Linda?" "What?" Her voice carried that slight edge it gets when she's caught off guard. "Oh, that. Linda's place was being fumigated. Last-minute change. I forgot to mention it. Linda lives in a house she inherited from their grandmother, built in 1952, solid as a fortress, and maintained like a museum. The idea of Linda allowing fumigation during a family visit was about as likely as me becoming a ballet dancer. I started paying attention after that, really paying attention. Alicia's work trips followed a pattern, once a month, sometimes twice, always to conferences or training sessions that somehow never appeared on her company's public calendar. She'd pack her nicest clothes, the kind she wore when she wanted to impress. Her phone would buzz with messages at odd hours, messages she'd read with a smile that never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. The breakthrough came courtesy of Mrs. Kowalski, our neighbor who treats gossip like a competitive sport. I was raking leaves when she wandered over, coffee mug in hand, and that look on her face that meant she had information to share. "That husband of Alicia's coworker sure is handsome," she said, watching my reaction. "Dominic something or other. Saw them at Marley's restaurant last Thursday. Very cozy table for two." Thursday, the day Alicia had worked late on budget reviews. Dominic Reyes. I knew him by reputation, 6'2", built like he lived at the gym, and cocky enough to think his charm could open any door. He supervised the factory floor at Morrison Industries, technically Alicia's subordinate, but positioned like he thought he ran the place.
The phone rang, interrupting my planning session. Alicia's voice bubbled through the speaker, bright and false as costume jewelry. "Hi, honey. Just wanted to let you know I made it safely. The hotel is nice, but I miss you already." "Miss you too," I said, looking at a photograph of her kissing another man. "Have fun at your conference." "Oh, you know how these things are. Probably boring presentations and bad coffee. I'll call you tomorrow." After she hung up, I opened my laptop and started making lists. Financial accounts to protect, legal documents to prepare, assets to secure. If Alicia wanted to play games, I'd show her what a real strategist could accomplish. My wife thought she was having a secret affair. What she was actually doing was funding her own destruction, one hotel receipt at a time. I poured another cup of coffee and got to work. By the time Alicia returned from her conference, I intended to have everything in place. The locks would be changed, the accounts would be secured, and my lawyer would be waiting at the door with divorce papers. Marriage might be like steel, but revenge? Revenge is like a perfectly engineered machine. Every component serves a purpose, every action creates a reaction, and when it's finished, there's nothing left but the satisfaction of a job well done. Alicia was about to discover what happens when you underestimate an engineer. Halloween fell on a Saturday that year, which meant Richard and his wife Nikki were throwing their annual costume party. Under normal circumstances, I would have looked forward to it. Richard throws legendary parties, good food, better drinks, and the kind of atmosphere where everyone forgets their problems for a few hours. This year, though, I had problems that wouldn't stay forgotten. "What are you going as?" Alicia asked, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. She'd squeezed herself into a black leather Catwoman costume that left very little to the imagination. The irony wasn't lost on me, my cheating wife dressed as a predator. "Pirate," I said, adjusting the bandana I'd tied around my head. My costume consisted of torn jeans, a white shirt, and a plastic sword from the dollar store. Next to Alicia's elaborate getup, I looked like I'd raided a thrift shop, which, honestly, was exactly how I felt about our marriage. The drive to Richard's house took 15 minutes. 15 minutes of Alicia chattering about work while I mentally reviewed everything I'd learned from my private investigator. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, a paper trail of betrayal that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy. "You're quiet tonight," Alicia observed as we pulled into Richard's driveway. "Just tired, long week." Richard's house blazed with orange and purple lights, fake spider webs draped across the porch like party streamers. Cars lined both sides of the street. Looked like half the neighborhood had shown up. Perfect. The more witnesses, the better. Inside, the party was already in full swing. Richard had transformed his living room into a haunted mansion, complete with fog machine and horror movie soundtrack. He spotted us immediately and bounded over, grinning beneath a vampire's cape. "Griff, Alicia, you made it!" He hugged us both, then stepped back to admire Alicia's costume. "Wow, Alicia, that's quite a look." "Thank you," she purred, literally purred. "I wanted something with a little edge this year." Edge, right, like the edge of a knife sliding between my ribs.
"Greg," Richard said, clapping me on the shoulder, "there's someone I want you to meet. John's here. Remember John from college? He's been asking about you." John Patterson stood near the bar, dressed as a cowboy and holding court with a group of neighbors. When he saw me, his face lit up with genuine pleasure. John and I had been roommates junior year, and he was one of those people who never forgot a friend. "Greg Griffin," he boomed, pulling me into a bear hug. "How the heck are you, man? Richard told me you were running operations at Riverside Steel. That's fantastic." We fell into easy conversation, the kind that happens when you reconnect with someone who knew you before life got complicated. John had moved to Denver after college, worked his way up in construction management, and was back in town visiting his parents. "So, how's married life treating you?" he asked, glancing toward where Alicia was chatting with a group of women near the kitchen. "Can't complain," I said, which was technically true. I could complain, but I was saving my energy for more productive activities. That's when I saw him. Dominic Reyes stood near the punch bowl, dressed as Tarzan in what amounted to a leather loincloth and not much else. His chest was oiled and gleaming under the party lights, his dark hair slicked back like he was posing for a romance novel cover. Several women had gathered around him, giggling at whatever story he was telling. My wife was not among them, but I could see her watching him from across the room. "Who's the caveman?" John asked, following my gaze. "That would be Dominic Reyes," I said. "Works with my wife." John studied Dominic with the kind of attention he usually reserved for structural problems.
"Interesting costume choice for a work party." "This isn't a work party." "No," John said slowly, "but he's here with coworkers, right? Seems like the kind of guy who'd want to make an impression." Before I could respond, Dominic caught sight of Alicia and started moving in her direction. I watched my wife's face transform as he approached. Her smile became brighter, her posture more animated. They hugged, a lingering embrace that lasted several seconds too long for casual coworkers. "Greg," John said quietly, "I don't know what's going on, but that doesn't look like a professional relationship." "No," I agreed, "it doesn't." The evening deteriorated from there. I found myself tracking Alicia and Dominic's movements like a detective, noting every meaningful glance, every casual touch, every whispered conversation. They were being careful, but not careful enough.
When you know what to look for, the signs become obvious. Around 10 o'clock, Richard organized his traditional Halloween debate. This year's topic, Hulk versus Superman. The crowd gathered in the living room, drinks in hand, ready to argue the merits of fictional combat. Superman's got speed and flight, argued Tom Henderson, our mailman, dressed as a zombie. Hulk can't hit what he can't catch. But Hulk gets stronger as he gets angrier, countered Lisa Walsh, Richard's next-door neighbor. Eventually, he'd be strong enough to hurt Superman. The debate raged for 20 minutes, growing more animated as alcohol loosened tongues and lowered inhibitions. I participated half-heartedly, more interested in watching Alicia and Dominic, who had positioned themselves on opposite sides of the room but kept making eye contact. That's when Dominic made his mistake.
"You know what Superman's real weakness is?" he announced, his voice carrying over the crowd. "He's too much of a Boy Scout. Sometimes you need someone willing to get dirty, to take what they want instead of waiting for permission." His eyes found Alicia as he spoke, and she smiled, the same smile I'd seen in the private investigator's photographs. Something snapped inside me. "Interesting philosophy," I said, standing up. The room quieted, sensing tension. "Taking what you want instead of waiting for permission? That work out well for you, Dominic?" He looked at me with surprise, then calculation. "I'm talking about fictional characters, Greg." "Are you? Because it sounds like you're talking about real-life situations, like maybe you've had experience taking things that don't belong to you." The room went silent, except for the horror movie soundtrack still playing in the background. Alicia's face had gone pale beneath her Catwoman mask. "I think you've had too much to drink," Dominic said, but his voice carried a warning. "Actually, I'm stone sober, clearer than I've been in months." I stepped closer to him, aware that everyone was watching. "You want to know Superman's real weakness? It's not kryptonite, it's trusting the wrong people." Dominic's jaw tightened. "What exactly are you trying to say?" "I'm saying that some people think they're clever, but they're really just obvious. They think they're getting away with something, but they're actually just digging their own graves." That's when he made his second mistake. "Maybe you should worry less about fictional heroes and more about keeping your own house in order," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a sneer.
John appeared at my elbow, shaking his head in amazement. "Well, that was educational." "How so?" "I just learned that my old roommate has developed quite a backbone since college." Richard approached with a beer and a concerned expression. "Greg, what the heck was that about?" I accepted the beer and took a long drink. That, my friend, was the opening move in a very interesting game. The party continued around us, but the energy had changed. People whispered in small groups, stealing glances in my direction. Mrs. Kowalski looked like Christmas had come early. She'd have enough gossip to last until New Year's. Perfect. Let them talk. Let the whole neighborhood know that Greg Griffin wasn't the pushover they thought he was. My phone buzzed with a text from Alicia. "We need to talk when you get home." I typed back, "Looking forward to it." But I had no intention of going home that night. I had plans to make, strategies to develop, and a marriage to dismantle. Alicia and Dominic thought they'd been playing me for a fool. They were about to learn the difference between being underestimated and being unprepared. I spent the night at Richard's house, sleeping on his couch like a college student after a particularly memorable party. The difference was that this time, I woke up with a clear head and a clearer purpose. "Coffee?" Richard asked, finding me awake at 6 a.m., staring at the ceiling. "Please." He handed me a mug and settled into his recliner, still wearing his vampire costume, minus the cape. "You want to tell me what's really going on?" I sat up, running my hands through my hair. "How long have you known me, Richard?" 15 years, give or take. "In all that time, have you ever known me to lose my temper in public?" He considered this. "No. You're usually the guy who keeps everyone else calm. So what do you think it would take to make me slap someone at a party?" Richard's expression grew serious. Something pretty significant. I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the private investigator's photos, Alicia and Dominic kissing outside the Palmer House Hotel.
Richard studied the image, his face cycling through surprise, anger, and finally understanding. "How long?" he asked. 14 months, maybe longer. Jesus, Greg, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be helpful. I need a place to stay while I handle some business. Of course, stay as long as you need. Richard paused, then added, "What kind of business are we talking about?" I smiled, and apparently it wasn't a pleasant expression because Richard actually leaned back in his chair. The kind that requires careful planning and precise execution. Over the next 3 days, I turned Richard's guest room into a command center. Legal documents spread across the desk, financial statements organized in neat piles, a timeline of Alicia's work trips cross-referenced with hotel receipts and credit card statements. My lawyer, Patricia Hendricks, had been handling the Griffin family legal matters for 8 years. She was a small woman with steel gray hair and the personality of a surgical instrument, sharp, precise, and devastatingly effective. "This is quite comprehensive," she said, reviewing my evidence. "Your wife has been remarkably careless." Careless or arrogant? Both, probably. The good news is that Pennsylvania is a no-fault divorce state, so we don't need to prove adultery to proceed. The bad news is that means her affair won't significantly impact the financial settlement. I'm not looking for her money.
That's wonderful, I said. You've been working so hard lately. You deserve a break. It's not exactly a break, 3 days of seminars on workplace compliance, but the hotel looks nice, and it'll be good to get away for a while. I'm sure it will be. When do you leave? Monday morning. I'll be back Thursday evening. Perfect. 4 days to complete my preparations. Have a wonderful time, I told her. Don't worry about anything here. I'll take care of everything. After she hung up, I called Patricia. It's time, I said. Are you certain? Once we serve the papers, there's no going back. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. That weekend, I made my final preparations. The storage unit contained everything I wanted to keep. The house was clean and empty except for Alicia's belongings, which I'd carefully packed and placed in the living room. The locks had been changed, and Patricia had confirmed that the divorce papers would be served on Thursday afternoon. Monday morning, I watched from Richard's window as Alicia loaded her suitcase into her car. She looked excited, practically glowing with anticipation. She was probably thinking about romantic dinners and hotel room service, long walks and intimate conversations. She had no idea she was driving toward the end of her marriage. I waited until her car disappeared around the corner, then drove to our house, my house, for the last time as a married man. I walked through the empty rooms, checking to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything important. In the bedroom, I found a hotel keycard on Alicia's nightstand. Embassy Suites again. She wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. I left the keycard where I'd found it and placed an envelope on the kitchen counter.
You planned this whole thing. I planned to protect myself and my assets from a wife who thought she could lie and cheat without consequences. If that makes me a bastard, I'll wear the title proudly. This is insane. We can work this out. Whatever you think you know. I held up my phone, showing her one of the private investigator's photographs. Her face went white. I know everything, Alicia. 14 months worth of everything. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, text messages. Did you really think I was too stupid to notice? She stared at the phone, then at me, then back at the house where Patricia was still waiting on the porch. The locks, she said weakly, changed this morning. Your belongings are packed in the living room. Patricia has the cashier's check for your share of our joint accounts. Your lawyer can contact her to discuss the details. Greg, please, we can fix this. I made a mistake, but you made 14 months worth of mistakes. The only thing I'm fixing is my life. I started the engine, and she stepped back from the truck. This isn't over, she said. You're absolutely right, I agreed. This is just the beginning. As I drove away, I could see her in the rearview mirror, standing in the street in front of a house she could no longer enter, holding divorce papers and a cashier's check, probably wondering how her perfect plan had collapsed so completely. I felt no satisfaction, no triumph, just the quiet peace that comes from solving a problem with precision and thoroughness. Alicia had thought she was playing chess while I played checkers. She was about to learn that I'd been studying the board all along, planning moves she couldn't even imagine. The game was far from over, but for the first time in 14 months, I was the one making the rules. The divorce papers were served on a Thursday. By Friday morning, the entire neighborhood knew about it, thanks to Mrs. Kowalski's remarkable talent for information distribution. By Friday afternoon, half the town was talking about Greg Griffin's dramatic marital collapse. I didn't mind the attention. In fact, I was counting on it. "Phone's been ringing all morning," Richard said, finding me in his kitchen with coffee and the morning paper. "Reporters from the local news want to interview you about modern marriage challenges." "Tell them I'm not interested in being anyone's cautionary tale." "What about Alicia? She's been calling here every hour." I looked up from the sports section. "What does she want?" "To talk to you, to explain, to work things out." Richard made air quotes around the last part. "There's nothing to work out. Patricia made that clear in the divorce papers." My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, but I recognized the tone. "You made a big mistake, Griffin. This isn't over." Dominic. Right on schedule. I showed the message to Richard, who shook his head in disgust. Guy doesn't know when to quit. Actually, that works in my favor. The more noise he makes, the more attention he draws to himself. What do you mean? I folded the newspaper and leaned back in my chair. Dominic thinks this is about him and me. He thinks if he can intimidate or embarrass me, I'll back down and he can go back to his comfortable arrangement with my wife. And he's about to discover that this was never about him. He was just collateral damage. Over the weekend, I put phase 2 of my plan into motion.
It started with a simple phone call to Morrison Industries' Human Resources Department. Not to Alicia, obviously, but to her supervisor, Janet Morrison. "Mrs. Morrison, this is Greg Griffin. I'm calling to report a potential workplace ethics violation involving my wife, Alicia Griffin, and her subordinate, Dominic Reyes." The conversation lasted 20 minutes. I provided dates, locations, and documentation of Alicia and Dominic's business trips that coincided with romantic getaways. I didn't mention the private investigator or the photographs, just the financial records and hotel receipts that any reasonable person could verify. "I'm not looking for anyone to be fired," I explained. "I just think the company should be aware that 2 employees have been using company resources to fund personal activities." Janet Morrison was a professional woman in her 60s who'd built her company's reputation on ethical business practices. The idea of employees abusing their positions for personal gain was exactly the kind of thing that kept her awake at night. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Mr. Griffin. We'll investigate immediately." Phase 2, Part B, involved a visit to Dominic's neighborhood. Dominic lived in Riverside Heights, a development of modest homes populated mostly by young families and blue-collar workers, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors and took pride in maintaining their properties. His house was easy to spot, the only one with a bright red Camaro parked in the driveway. The car was Dominic's pride and joy, a restored 1969 model that he'd spent 2 years and probably $15,000 perfecting. I parked across the street and waited. At 11 p.m., when the neighborhood was quiet and most people were asleep, I made my move. Not vandalism. I'm not a criminal, just creative expression. The spray paint was washable, the kind used for temporary markings on construction sites. The message I left on Dominic's windshield was simple and direct: cheater. The pair of women's underwear I draped over his side mirror were from a discount store, still with the tags attached. Bright red with Jungle King printed across the front in gold letters, a special order that had cost me $30 and provided immense satisfaction. I was back in Richard's guest room by midnight, setting my alarm for 6 a.m. I wanted to be awake when Dominic discovered my handiwork. The phone call came at 6:23 a.m. "Griffin!" Dominic's voice was hoarse with rage. "I know it was you!" "Good morning, Dominic. You sound upset. Trouble sleeping?" "You vandalized my car!" "Did I? That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof?" "I don't need proof. I know it was you." "Well, if you're certain, I suppose you should call the police. File a report. I'm sure they'd be very interested in your situation." There was a long pause. We both knew he wouldn't call the police.
Explaining why someone had spray-painted cheater on his car would require discussing his relationship with Alicia, which was exactly the kind of attention he wanted to avoid. "This isn't over," he said finally. "You keep saying that. I'm starting to think you don't understand what over means." He hung up on me, which was fine. I had other calls to make. Mrs. Kowalski answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting by the phone. "Greg, how are you holding up, dear?" "I'm doing well, Mrs. Kowalski. Actually, I was wondering if you'd heard anything interesting lately."
You know how you keep an ear to the ground. Well, she said, and I could practically hear her settling in for a good gossip session. There's been quite a bit of talk about that Dominic fellow. Apparently, someone decorated his car last night. Really? How unfortunate. Yes, and Marina, that's his wife, she was asking around the neighborhood this morning, wanting to know if anyone saw anything suspicious. Marina Reyes. I'd been wondering when she'd enter the picture. Marina seems like a nice woman, I said. I hope she's handling all this drama okay. Oh, she's handling it all right. Word is she's been asking some very pointed questions about her husband's work schedule. Apparently, his overtime shifts don't match up with the company's records. Perfect. Marina was conducting her own investigation. Well, I hope everything works out for the best, I said. Thanks for keeping me informed, Mrs. Kowalski. Anytime, dear. You know I'm always here if you need anything. By Monday morning, the ripple effects of my weekend activities were spreading through town like water through a cracked foundation. Alicia had been placed on administrative leave pending Morrison Industries' investigation into her relationship with Dominic. Dominic himself had been transferred to a different department and assigned to work directly under Janet Morrison's supervision. The local news had picked up the story, not as a human interest piece about modern marriage, but as a business ethics investigation involving a respected local company. No names were mentioned, but in a town the size of ours, anonymity was impossible. I was reading about it online when my phone rang. Unknown number again. "Mr. Griffin, this is Marina Reyes. I think we should talk." Marina suggested meeting at Denny's, a neutral location where we could have a private conversation without attracting too much attention. I arrived first and chose a booth in the back corner, away from the main dining area. Marina Reyes was not what I'd expected. Instead of the fragile, victimized wife I'd imagined, she was a compact woman in her early 30s with intelligent dark eyes and the kind of presence that suggested she didn't suffer fools gladly. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Thank you for calling. I wasn't sure if you'd want to talk to me." "Why wouldn't I?" "Because your husband and my wife have put us in an awkward situation." Marina laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Awkward? That's one way to put it. The waitress brought coffee, and we sat in silence for a moment, sizing each other up. "How long have you known?" I asked finally. "About the affair? 6 months, maybe longer." She stirred sugar into her coffee with mechanical precision. "Dominic isn't as clever as he thinks he is. Late nights, mysterious phone calls, sudden interest in professional development conferences. It wasn't hard to figure out. Why didn't you confront him?" "Because I wanted to be sure, and because I wanted to be prepared." She looked up from her coffee. "What about you?" 14 months of evidence. Hotel receipts, photographs, text messages. I hired a private investigator. Thorough. I'm an engineer. Thorough is what I do. Marina smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from her. "I'm a paralegal. Thorough is what I do too." We understood each other. "So, what happens now?" I asked. "Now, we make sure they understand that their actions have consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Marina reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. The kind that hurt where it matters most, their reputations, their careers, and their bank accounts. She opened the folder and spread several documents across the table. Financial records, employment contracts, and what looked like legal correspondence. "Dominic makes $68,000 a year," she said. "Our mortgage is $5,500 a month. Car payments, credit cards, and his precious gym membership add up to another $2,000. Without his job, he can't maintain his lifestyle."
And with the ethics investigation, he's probably going to be fired, or, at best, demoted to a position where he can't abuse his authority. I studied the documents. This is impressive work. I've been preparing for this conversation for months. The question is, are you interested in working together? What did you have in mind? Marina leaned forward, her eyes bright with calculation. Your wife and my husband think they're in love. They think they can weather this scandal and come out stronger on the other side. And I think they're about to discover that love doesn't pay the bills or restore damaged reputations. I looked at this woman, this stranger who'd become my unlikely ally, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. What's the first step? I asked. Marina smiled, and it was the kind of smile that would have made Dominic very nervous if he'd been there to see it. Marina Reyes turned out to be the partner I never knew I needed.
Dominic was easy to spot, bench pressing what looked like twice his body weight, while a small audience of admirers watched. Marina and I positioned ourselves near the free weights, close enough to observe but far enough away to avoid immediate detection. We didn't have to wait long. "Hey, Dom," called out a guy in a tank top that read Beast Mode. "Heard you had some excitement at your house over the weekend." Dominic's rhythm faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "Yeah, some punk kids thought they were funny. Washable paint, no real damage." "Kids, huh?" Tank top guy looked skeptical. "Seemed pretty targeted for random vandalism." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, man. Just saying, cheater is a pretty specific message." The gym went quiet. Everyone within earshot was suddenly very interested in Dominic's response. "Like I said," Dominic replied, his voice tight, "punk kids." That's when Marina made her move. She walked over to the bench where Dominic was still lying, positioned herself where everyone could see her, and spoke in a voice that carried across the entire weight room. "Hello, husband." Dominic's face went white. The barbell wavered in his hands, and tank top guy quickly stepped forward to help guide it back to the rack. "Marina," Dominic said, sitting up slowly, "what are you doing here?" "I came to see how you're handling your recent career setbacks. I heard Morrison Industries is conducting an ethics investigation." The gym had gone completely silent. Even the music seemed quieter. "We should discuss this at home," Dominic said, glancing around at the audience they'd attracted. "Should we? Like we discussed your business trips with Alicia Griffin."
Meet me at Marley's restaurant tomorrow at 7 p.m. Come alone. I showed the message to the others. "It's a trap," Richard said immediately. "Of course it's a trap," I agreed. "The question is, what kind of trap?" Marina studied the message thoughtfully. She's desperate. The administrative leave, the ethics investigation, the public attention, none of this is what she expected when she started her affair. So what does she want? To negotiate, to find some way to minimize the damage to her reputation and her career. And what are you going to tell her? I looked around the table at my unlikely team of allies, my best friend, his wife, and the woman whose husband had been sleeping with my wife. 6 months ago, none of us had known each other beyond casual neighborhood acquaintances. Now we were united by betrayal and bound by a common purpose. "I'm going to tell her that some mistakes can't be undone," I said, "and some consequences can't be negotiated away." Marina raised her wine glass in a toast. "To consequences." "To justice," Richard added. "To making sure they never underestimate us again," Nikki concluded. We drank to that, and I felt something I hadn't experienced since discovering Alicia's affair: complete confidence in my choices. Tomorrow, I would face my wife for the first time since serving her with divorce papers. She would probably try to charm me, manipulate me, or convince me that our marriage was worth saving. She was going to be disappointed. The game had moved beyond marriage and divorce. This was about accountability, consequences, and making sure that Alicia and Dominic understood exactly what they had lost when they decided to betray the people who trusted them. Marina was right about one thing: some mistakes can't be undone.
The man you're talking to now has learned better. Our drinks arrived, providing a brief interruption to the tension. Alicia took a large sip of her wine, her hands trembling slightly. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "Nothing. I want you to sign the divorce papers, split our assets according to the settlement agreement, and disappear from my life." "And if I don't?" I pulled out my phone and showed her a photograph, one of many the private investigator had taken of her and Dominic together. Then these pictures get shared with everyone we know. Your family, your friends, your professional contacts. The local newspaper has already expressed interest in the Morrison Industries ethics investigation. I'm sure they'd love to have visual evidence to accompany their story. Alicia went pale. You wouldn't? Try me. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of destroyed trust and ruined futures settling between us like fog. I loved you, she said quietly. No, you didn't. You loved the security I provided and the freedom I gave you to pursue whatever caught your interest, but you never loved me enough to be honest with me. That's not true. It is true, and we both know it. Alicia finished her wine and signaled for another. What happens now? Now you go back to Pittsburgh, sign the divorce papers, and figure out how to rebuild your life, preferably somewhere far from here. What about Dominic? What about him? Are you going to keep destroying his life? I considered the question seriously. Dominic made his own choices. He pursued a married woman, lied to his wife, and abused his position at work. The consequences he's facing are the natural result of his actions. Marina is trying to have him arrested for tax evasion. Marina is a paralegal who understands how to protect her interests. If Dominic has been evading taxes, that's between him and the IRS. Alicia's second glass of wine arrived, and she took a large gulp before speaking again. I never meant for any of this to happen. Yes, you did. Maybe not the consequences, but you meant for the affair to happen. You chose to pursue it month after month, lie after lie. You just thought you were smarter than everyone else. And you? What did you think? I considered that question. I thought I was married to someone who respected me enough to be honest with me. I was wrong. So what now? You get your revenge and we all live with the wreckage? I get justice. You and Dominic live with the consequences of your choices. Marina gets a fresh start, and I move on with my life. Alicia laughed bitterly. Justice? You sound like a vigilante. I sound like someone who got tired of being taken advantage of. She stood up abruptly, swaying slightly from the wine. This conversation is over. Yes, it is. Don't contact me again. I won't need to. Patricia will handle everything from here. Alicia walked toward the exit, then turned back for one final comment. You'll regret this, Greg. Someday, when you're alone and bitter, you'll regret destroying everything we had. Alicia, I said calmly, you destroyed everything we had the first time you lied to me. I just made sure you couldn't do it again. She left without another word, and I sat alone at the table, finishing my coffee and feeling something I hadn't experienced in over a year, peace.
My phone buzzed with a text from Marina. How did it go? I typed back, exactly as expected. She wanted to negotiate. I declined. Good. Dominic tried to come home tonight. I had the locks changed. Where is he now? Probably at a motel, or maybe sleeping in his precious car. I don't care anymore. 3 days later, the local newspaper ran a front-page story about the Morrison Industries ethics investigation. No names were mentioned, but everyone in town knew exactly who was involved. The article described a pattern of employees using company resources for personal activities, resulting in terminations and potential criminal charges. Marina called me that afternoon with an update. Dominic was fired this morning. Janet Morrison cited misuse of company resources, falsification of expense reports, and conduct unbecoming of a supervisor. What about Alicia? Terminated as well, same reasons. I felt a sense of completion, like finishing a complex engineering project. All the variables had been accounted for, all the problems had been solved. What happens next? I asked. Next, we get on with our lives. I'm keeping the house, half of Dominic's retirement account, and full custody of our dog. He gets to explain to his next employer why he was fired from Morrison Industries. And Alicia? Last I heard, she was moving back to Pittsburgh permanently. Apparently, her sister has a spare bedroom. That evening, I sat on Richard's back porch with a beer, watching the sunset over a town that had become too small for all the secrets it had been hiding.
My phone was quiet, my conscience was clear, and my future was entirely my own.
Richard joined me, carrying his own beer and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who'd witnessed justice being served. "So," he said, settling into the chair next to mine, "what's next for Greg Griffin?" I thought about that question. For over a year, my life had been defined by Alicia's betrayal and my response to it. Now, with the divorce finalized and the consequences distributed, I was free to focus on whatever came next. "I'm thinking about buying a boat," I said. "A boat?" "Something small, maybe take up fishing." Richard laughed. "You hate fishing." "I hate being lied to and cheated on. Turns out I don't mind fishing at all." We sat in comfortable silence, two middle-aged men contemplating the strange turns life could take. In the distance, I could see Mrs. Kowalski working in her garden, probably planning her next gossip campaign. The thought made me smile. "You know what the best part of all this is?" Richard asked. "What's that?" "Alicia and Dominic thought they were so clever, sneaking around, thinking they were getting away with something. They never realized they were just digging their own graves." I raised my beer in a toast to underestimating the wrong people. "To consequences," Richard agreed. As the sun disappeared behind the trees and the streetlights began to flicker on, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before I discovered that hotel keycard in Alicia's purse: genuine optimism about the future. Tomorrow, I would start looking for my own place, maybe something with a garage where I could set up a workshop, maybe something near the lake where I could keep that boat I was thinking about buying. Tonight, though, I was content to sit with my friend, drink my beer, and enjoy the quiet satisfaction of a job well done.
Marriage might be like steel, but revenge, when it's planned carefully and executed with precision, is like a perfectly balanced equation. Every variable accounted for, every outcome predicted, every consequence earned. Alicia and Dominic had thought they were writing their own love story. Instead, they'd authored their own destruction, one lie at a time. And I was finally free to write my own ending.